Welcome to Land Speed Legends, a podcast talking to the men, the women, the legends that make land speed racing great. Discover the stories of these ordinary people whose passion for land speed racing has made them legendary. And now, here's your host, the Bonneville Belle, the High Boy Honey, the Salt Princess, Allison Volk-Dean.
Today, I am interviewing BJ Burkdoll. BJ has been going to the Bonneville Salt Flats for over 40 years. He got in the Bonneville 200 Mile Per Hour Club in 1996 at the age of 18. At the time, he was one of the youngest people to get in the club. After years of crewing on his family streamliner, he began volunteering for the USFRA and is now head of tech inspection for competition cars and the 130 and 150 mile per hour club. BJ's love for the salt is so great, he even got married out there. Currently, he is partners with Chad Zupan on his nitro pushrod Harley. Hang on, this will be as excellent as a sunset on your way off the salt. Thank you, BJ, for coming down here. I know it's a lot of time to spend, especially, two interviews at the same time, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Good.
I'm actually been looking forward to this the whole time. So
good. It will be fun. I just want to hear about your marriage on the salt. Why don't you just start off with telling us that really quick?
That's a pretty amazing deal. 20 years ago, it's been 20 years now. I met my wife. We were high school sweethearts, and it didn't work out at first. And I introduced her to one of my good friends, and they ended up married for a short period of time, and it didn't work out. And then me and Brooke got back together afterwards. And my wife loves white. It's her favorite color. So when we start talking about getting married, she says, I want a white wedding, big white. I said, well, I know the whitest place on the planet. So, and it kind of started off as a joke. Let's get married on the Salt Flats. She wanted to kind of elope. It was her second marriage, and she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. And my mom, of course, wasn't having that. And my mom has no daughters. She has all boys, and we're all Salt Flats racers. And we just kind of put something together and decided that we were going to do that. Discovery Channel found out about it. Somehow, I have no idea. Somebody turned our name into Discovery Channel. Maybe my mom. I don't know exactly who it was, but Discovery of Canada was doing a show called Willard Weddings. So they sent a photography crew down with us for over a week and filmed the whole thing, the leading up to the marriage, and the salt and all of that was broadcast in Discovery of Canada. So that turned out really good. And a couple of magazines also, showed up, one from Japan, and filmed the whole deal. We were carting television crews around. It was a bit of a hectic show. We're trying to run the streamliner at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
We got a 300 plus mile an hour car. We're trying to get dialed in.
Trying to get married. Things are happening.
And it was a really cool deal. It was one of those speed weeks that there was a lot happening. One of our iconic drivers that we all love and cherish, Nolan White, 400 mile an hour pass on the exact same day as our wedding. So, we got to celebrate that with Nolan. We took our wedding cake that was left over to Nolan. Nolan's super quiet. Him and his boy and his grandson there. They'd just run 400 and tried for years to get that streamliner to really do that multiple times. That car went extremely fast, and we took our wedding cake over. Nolan didn't even know what to say, and just had a good time with all the San Diego Roadster guys. And that's Bonneville.
Yeah, that's a neat story.
It's great, and that's what I enjoy about Bonneville. I get married out there. I've had children out there.
Yeah. And you grew up out there.
I grew up out there.
You grew up growing out there. What was it like growing up out there?
Well, I got started super early. I was really young, and I'm a third generation. And, and then we started bicycling. We were riding our bicycles out there when we were little boys.
Yep.
And my mom's got all boys, and my dad was very competitive, and my grandfather was extremely competitive at Bonneville and was really good at it. And, we did a shoestring budget kind of thing. My granddad would run a streamliner out of the back of a pickup truck. We didn't own a trailer. So they had a streamline car that they literally put in the bed of the truck and drove it out to Bonneville. And they had a small toolbox, carry-on toolbox full of tools and a card table. And that's what we went racing with.
Yeah. And I kind of talked about this with your brother a little bit, is that that's what I think is neat about your family and other families as well. But you guys weren't doing this on a very large, and our family is the same way. My dad's always trying to figure things out, but you're not doing it on this large budget, right? And you're just doing with what works. And
this is 100%, low budget deal. This is like, we do it every day, but we do it with no money every day.
Yeah.
So, you're always shade tree mechanic and kind of things. You're always using your brain to really set land speed records. And that's what really makes Bonneville incredible is, there's some guys out there with money and they started at the bottom too. And they've got sponsorships and big heavy hitting cars. And, but what's really interesting is the fact that a cheap car that was built in the backyard in some small garage or not even a garage at all can still compete against a guy that's got a multi-million-dollar automobile, and that's what I really enjoy about Bonneville is it kind of levels the playing field between those with money and those without.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is what makes it neat. And somebody who's maybe listening to this that is just thinking about Bonneville or getting into Bonneville that you can do it. You just need to start doing it and that you don't have to have a big budget.
No, you don't. And, we've done both ends of it. We have a very expensive streamliner that's taken years to develop. That's a current brand new project. And, really when you sit down and look at it with the hour count and the bills, it's a $500,000 to $750,000 automobile. And on the flip side of that, my brother's running on a budget that he's got a car that's got relatively low cost in it. I have a pickup truck that we've run that's got a motorcycle engine in it that literally I built the truck for less than $4,000.
Yeah.
And it qualified on a record on its first pass.
Yeah.
And so this is, you can do it from both ends of the spectrum. I've helped friends and lots of friends I've introduced to Bonneville. A lot of them have come out and worked as officials or course stewards or things like that. Others have gone on to build cars and, it's Bonneville gets in your soul. I mean, it really does. Every time I've been out there every year for about 40 years now, I don't miss events, even the ones that are rained out. The only event I've ever missed actually was recently. Speed Week rained out and I stayed home and I actually felt guilty. It's the first real rain out that I wasn't there.
Just didn't even get out there.
I didn't even get out there. The guys called and said, hey, it's flooded. Don't come. Save yourself the headache. I have, at the time I started a new job, I didn't have a lot of time off.
Yeah.
So I couldn't leave early. My brother and my family was already there. And then my partner was already there. And they called Chad called me and said, hey, don't come. There's no way we're running.
Yeah.
So I stayed home and the rest of the guys, the other side of Bonneville, the hot rod side of Bonneville.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. I have friends that are out there with their hot rods and they're out there photographing and doing things in town at the airport. And it turned out to be beautiful. You can see a lot of that on other podcasts.
With the water and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was fun actually that night. Let's see, they got rained out Friday and then Saturday night was actually really fun because everybody was in town, at the Hot Rod Car Show in Wendover. And it was just like all the racers knew that they weren't going to be racing in the morning. So it was kind of like a big,
it's a huge
it was really
get-together.
fun. Yeah.
And that's the one thing about Bonneville is the racers and the spectators combined. You can't tell the difference between the two. They're all hanging out. They're having a good time. You don't see fights at Bonneville. There's not guys, rubbing elbows and getting upset about what's going on. I mean, it's like one big happy family. And that's what really makes Bonneville so unique is the fact that, even if I remember one of the stories I remember years ago, we were running a streamliner with a motorcycle engine in it and we heard it and, it put us on the trailer and we had a friend that was running a streamliner in our exact same class that needed some parts. And we took parts off our car, loaned them to Terry. Terry loaded them in his liner, Terry Moreau, and did everything we could to help those guys out. They ended up setting a land speed record.
That's right. That's Bonneville right there.
And they're doing it on one of our records and parts they borrowed from us. And this is the way it worked. And that's what you do for your fellow friend. Everybody in that pit area is a friend. Yeah. Everybody's got some piece of equipment that somebody else might need. You hear it broadcast on the radio all the time. Somebody needs a welder in so-and-so's pit. Somebody will chime right back in. I got one right here. This is where to find me. And you just go out and help. Yeah. And that's what makes Bonneville great. Yeah.
And growing up out there, you definitely saw so many examples of that, right? And that's where it really got into, where you really, it fortified that. I definitely did.
One of the really cool things for me is I was really young at the time. I can't even tell you how young, probably 6, 7, 8 years old. I had a bicycle. That's the way I got around Bonneville. I took my BMX bike. It was a BMX bike. And, I'm pretty white. I have to stay suntan lotioned and covered up. So my lips break out really bad. I end up with cold sores really heavily when I'm at Bonneville. So my mom always made me wear a bandana on my face. So I look like the I look like a bean bandit. I mean, everybody that goes to Bonneville knows what bean bandits are. So I look like a bean bandit, wore a red bandana on my face, and I decided that my BMX bike didn't look Bonneville enough. So we dug through the dumpster, found cardboard boxes and every roll of duct tape we could find. And I turned my handlebars upside down and built a streamline nose cone and turned my BMX bike into a Bonneville land speed vehicle, had a tail. We built out of a beer box from one of the guys. And this is what we did. And I did this when I was young. So and everybody was like super supportive of everything that was going on. They were.
I'm sure they loved it. They ate that up.
Yeah, they were handing rolls of duct tape to me. Sharpies, spray cans. You got to letter it. You got to put your family number on it. One of the motorcycle guys would say, "Okay, well, this falls in this class." He goes over there and Sharpies on the lettering, for the correct class, and this is what you're doing. And you're 6 years old at the time. So, I mean, these guys all helped me become what I am today. And my family, they everybody that was out there at the time, and you're shaking hands with some pretty big names. I mean, there's some iconic people that come from the land speed industry and the land speed racing community that they don't realize that they're as important as they are. I mentioned one earlier, Nolan White's one of those people. He's no longer with us. He died in a car crash out there, unfortunately. But there's other people. Al Teague always took time for us kids. Him and Jane, just dynamite people. The Teague family would always, Al would be covered his elbows in nitro and oil, and he'd get out from underneath the streamliner and shake your hand and ask you how you were doing. And this is the way that Bonneville is. Yeah.
That's a really cute story about you and your bike. I can imagine these guys just stopping like their big projects that they have that they've been working on to help you out. I mean, that's what they would do. And especially raising kids out there myself, and you've raised kids out there. I see it with my kids, how people do the same thing for them. So, and you have kids out there. What was it like raising them out there?
Well, my kids, I'm a really young father, so I got started in this game really early. I got in the 2 club when I was 18 years old. And at the time, I already had a child. My first son came to me when I was in high school. I graduated high school, and 5 days later, I got my firstborn son.
Oh, wow.
So he's been raised out there, literally. He's been out there every year since the day he was born. And now I have 3 children, and my oldest boy is also having children. So now we're raising grandchildren out there. Yeah. And they spend time with us, and they're all part of the family, part of the crew. And everybody has their job, really. It's not necessarily that you assign jobs. It's just like everybody finds their niche at Bonneville that they can do well at. You have with the 2 club booth for years. Yeah. And your family does an amazing job with the 2 club deal. And the Save the Salt program is also there. So you have all those T-shirts and people that you got to shake hands with, and this is what goes on. It's not necessarily that you decided you had to have that job. You just saw the need and filled the need, and that's the way Bonneville works. My kids are the same way. My grandchildren are the same way. Honestly, my mom started that. Yeah. My mom made sure that we all had sandwiches. Otherwise, none of us guys would even eat. Yeah. we just go all day and just race. We'd forget to eat. So mom makes sandwiches. My mom's always considered herself be the crew chief, we'll call her. And my mom made sure that we drank our water and ate our sandwiches and put our suntan lotion on. And this is the way it works out there. So, my family's grown up out there, and my boys are all riding bikes, and then ultimately grew into my oldest boys running in the 130 club. They run a Honda in the 130 club, and we're starting to talk about, them spending time in future projects. And, we got a little busy too with ourselves, with other things. So, there's only so much of you to go around.
Yeah. I like that point that you make, though, that everybody finds their niche, because the person that is helping making the sandwiches or the food, or maybe making sure whatever, may not seem as big as, let's say, racing or driving, but it is just such an important part of the whole crew, and it really does contribute. And that's one thing I would like to bring on as people that are not necessarily drivers, but that are important to the crew and have been going out there, or spectators or whatnot. Those are also land speed legends as well.
They are. We have a serious amount of crew that's been with us our whole lives. Some of those guys have spent 40 years with me. They're like my dads or my moms. We have crew members that some of them have even passed, but they all have their niche thing that they did. We have one gentleman that's helped us for years. His name is Gordon Downing. He's recently passed. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. But he did the tarp in the pit area. He showed up a day early, set up pit area, and we're back rowers, really. We're kind of on the back row, not the front row. we stay out of the way and kind of do our own thing. My mom always tries to get on the front row, but the front row's kind of got congested over the years. We don't have the Volk family status. So
no, that's not quite.
We kind of gone to the back row a lot of times. But Gordon always show up, and he'd always bring the tarp, set the tarp up, pick out the pit area, and this is what we did. And Gordon's a key member. He always chased the car down. He drove an El Camino out there at the Salt Flats and fire extinguisher, and he always received the streamliner. He was never on the start line, but he's always the recipient of the streamliner. So if something goes wrong, Gordon Downing was the first one to know.
Yeah.
And he's just one of Dan Hostetter was the same way. Hostetter always did the pushing. He pushed with a 32 Ford 3-window coupe. And this is an honest to God 32 Ford 3-window coupe that was involved with us as children. There's movies of me surfing on the running boards, driving up and down the pit area, because back then you could do a lot of things. They weren't as strict.
Wasn't as big. So
it wasn't as big. We led to some of the rules that are in effect, us boys, definitely me and my two brothers, we motorcycle and go-kart and do all of that. And I think that's some of the reason the SCTA put in the rule that's, states that you have to have a driver's license to even drive in the pit areas, because we were busy terrorizing the shit out of the pit area. Some motorcycle or go-kart or whatever we happened to bring that year, because, we've been there our whole lives. And my boys do the same thing. And my daughter, I have a daughter that's also active, and my wife also, we all do this together as a family. And, we plan Bonneville from day one, and we just go from there. I mean, you haven't left Bonneville for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Exit 4 is the exit that everybody's familiar with. You ain't headed back towards the Salt Lake area. You ain't 2 miles out of Wendover, and you're already trying to figure out how the hell you're going to get back. And that's the way Bonneville is. That's
right. That's such a good point. I like that. You never really leave. And and you do. It is your family out there, even your direct family and your extended family, your Bonneville family. And it just feels like it hasn't been a year by the next time you see them. I mean, it just is. You're just right back into it. So I love that. And all these people, I think those are some great examples of just the, coming and setting out the tarp and receiving the car at the end are just great examples of people that help the whole process to get drivers like you into the Bonneville 200 mile an hour club. And so when you got in the 2 club, and you had those people supporting you, but what was it like getting in young, and what was just tell us about the story about getting in the 2 club.
Well, even though I got in the 2 club at a relatively young age, a lot younger than most people, and it came, I won't say it came easy. It didn't come easy. At the time, my dad was partnered with another gentleman, Skip Hedricks, a long-time land speed racer that's also a 200 and 300 mile an hour chapter member. And at the time, Skip was running our car, and we had some partnership going on. And I really wanted to be the 16-year-old 200 mile an hour club member, but I had to wait my turn. And
that's right.
And Skip was struggling getting the car down the racetrack. And finally, the partnership between my dad and Skip had ended, and I got to take the seat, but it was a couple of years later than that. Prior to that, I was doing a lot of the tuning. I've always been part of the development for the car. I wanted to be an aerodynamic engineer when I was a child. And my mom always said that that's the one word he could say, aerodynamic engineer, before he learned how to count down there.
It was one of your first words.
I mean, it's really what I wanted to be. So, years later, I've got to meet Tom Birkland and spend a lot of time with him. And then I've done all the aerodynamic development on our family streamliner for a long time, and a lot of other streamliners over the years. But in the beginning days, just prior to me getting the 200 mile an hour club, I was tuning engines and doing engine work with my dad, of course, while my mom was driving. We were running motorcycle engines at the time, so I did a lot of assembly work on the motors. I was 12 years old at the time.
Wow.
So I'm doing camshafts and timing chains. My dad was busy as an official, because my family has always done whatever they could do as officials and volunteering time. My mom, my dad, my brother, myself, and a lot of our friends. We have always volunteered our time when it comes to the USFRA or the SCTA. And at the time, my dad was inspecting for the SCTA and the USFRA both, and he didn't have enough time to deal with a car. So my mom was on the verge of getting in a 200 mile an hour club, and we had the engine tore apart, and I did all the engine work when I was 12, 13, 14 years old.
Wow.
So my dad didn't have the stress, and that's the way that we did it. So, I was waiting my turn when I got in the 2 Club.
Yeah.
And finally, we went through hiccups. Everybody does. You know, you have engine trouble or, you know, and there's key people that come to help out. And one of our key people in our group is the Vesco family, you know, Don Vesco and Rick Vesco and the other brother, Chuck, that's not in the limelight. Those people have spent a ton of time with us, helping us out. And they turned us on to something that may work on our streamliner. We were over air in the streamliner, if you could believe that at the time. And we had a little bit too much air intake, and we started closing that up and become successful pretty quickly. And later on, a Tom Birkeland mathematical equation led to an airbox that's now on the car.
Yeah.
And we've used that formula ever since.
Oh, so that really worked for you.
It did. It put about 20 miles an hour on the car at the time.
Wow. And so what was it exactly that he had done?
He led me to the formula to calculate the air intake volume.
Wow.
So the incoming air in the engine is basically if you got a 60 cubic inch engine, you can't feed it any more than 60 cubic inches every revolution if you're talking about a 4-stroke motor. So there's a calculation that leads to an airbox equation that allows the amount of air coming in the engine to not exceed that 60 cubic inches, basically in layman's terms.
Yeah.
So we decreased the intake nozzle size, which increased the velocity coming in the airbox, and then you could slow it down so the engine can consume it, and it doesn't interrupt the drag on the outside of the car. So not only are you improving the drag on the outside, you're also making the engine breathe better. So, and it worked. And it led to me, I was running on my mom's record at the time.
What was that?
It was about 114, I think.
Wait, 214 you mean?
Or 214, yeah. Excuse me, 214. And I ended up qualifying on the record at 215 and made a 2-way average pass. And back then it was 2 ways. And ended up in the 200 mile an hour club in 96 at 214.359, I think is the number. And,
okay. And so you were tuning the car and racing the car at the same time.
I was. My dad, we've always been involved with other Bonneville families. Yeah. My dad was doing a lot of fiberglass work in the beginning days, and then I took on that also. The two of us were together. And there was a time when the 10 fastest cars at the Bonneville Salt Flats had some body panel or body that we had created.
Oh, wow.
So, it started in the first one I participated with. Well, the first one I actually participated with, I was about 7 years old at the time, was my granddad's streamliner got rebodied in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was a young child, and I was block sanding primer and filler and fiberglass back then when my dad... This is the Bluebird? This is the Bluebird, yes. That car originally was an aluminum bodied car, and it got changed to a fiberglass body. At the time, the SCTA had made some rule book changes. The car was in retirement because the car was actually built in the 50s. And that was pre-helmet laws. And it went into retirement. My grandfather moved from Southern California to Utah. My grandmother's from here. My dad decided when he was a late teenager, early 20s, to dig the car back out and pursue, land speed racing again because they'd taken some time off. And that car was, like I said, is pre-helmet law. So the head cage was too short, and they had to cut the car and stretch the head cage up about 3 inches so you could wear a modern helmet inside that car and still see over the dash. This car is quite small. Like I said, it fits in the bed of a pickup truck. And they rebodied the car in about 1980, 79, 80, right in there. And I helped block sand that out. And then later on, we went on to build its replacement.
You were very old then. You were just tiny.
I was 4 or 5, and my dad was fortunate enough to let me in the garage and hand me a sanding block and say, okay, you need to do this, and started showing me the ropes in the early days. Of course, I had no idea what I was doing. I probably made more work for him than I actually got accomplished. But
having kids in a shop, yes, you probably did, but that's okay. It's good. It's good stuff.
And then later on, we went on, and my dad helped Rick Vesco build what is now the turbine car.
Yeah.
And they laid that body up, and I went up and mixed resin and things like that. And
that's cool. I didn't know that.
That's cool. Really the first time I got a serious look at what it takes to do real world fiberglass. And we continued on from there. Of course, we built our own family car in the middle of that same deal while Rick was working on what would become the 111 car, or the turbine car. We refer to it today. Back then, it had 2 Chevrolets in it. But, he was building that in Brigham City, and we'd go up there and participate with that. And that's really my first wide open fiberglass endeavor. And then later on, of course, Terry Nish's streamliner became, the next heavy hitting one. We built a lot of parts for other cars, including your family Roadster. Yeah. We did a couple of air intake nozzles for the family Roadster over the years.
That's cool.
my dad built one in the early days and I built one in the later days. And, so it's, you're always exchanging services, so to speak. And so, we went on to do the Terry Nish Streamliner and then Ferguson's, one of Ferguson's cars as well. And, there's been quite a few that have come out of that whole deal there. And, we did an air intake nozzle for Earl Wooden's car at the time. That's now.
Oh, Earl Wooden.
Yeah, Earl's another great person.
That makes me almost tear up thinking about him.
Yeah, he had a really killer competition coupe. Did a course crashed, and he was lucky enough to survive it. Because not all guys are, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But Earl ended up buying a Streamliner from Howard Nasker, another longtime Salt Flats racer, and that car was struggling with the air intake calculation, similar to what we were. And I ended up building an airbox for that car. And then ultimately that car ended up being one of the cars that cracked 400. I mean, that's a pretty rare deal. Yeah. There's only a dozen or so cars that have ever gone 400. And that happens to be one of the cars that it has, as well as, of course, the turbine car. And so, there's been a couple of bodies that I've built over the years that are all pretty fast.
Really. That is so. You guys have made huge contributions to land speed racing. Now, your fiberglass, is this your guys' business? I'm not, or is this your?
Yeah, it is a business for us. Definitely. Yeah. At the time, it was a big part of our business. Okay. But there's, Bonneville cars are few and far between.
Right.
So there's not enough Bonneville land speed racing cars to stay in business full time.
Right. You weren't doing it just for that.
Yeah. We owned a body shop. My dad was an employee at Hillfield at the time, and about the same time I graduated high school, he ended up getting ripped from Hillfield. So I took my college money that I was saving, and I really couldn't go to college anyway because I was a stay-at-home father. Yeah. So I'm raising children at an extreme young age, and we decided to buy a body shop.
Okay. So that's where that comes into play.
I was doing collision work at the time and hot rods also, and then the body industry for the land speed racing endeavor just kind of filled in the gaps. Yeah. And pretty soon, what ended up happening is we were doing more fiberglass exotic car work for the Salt Flats and aerodynamic consultant. And we almost ran out of time to actually run the body shop. And I was doing a lot of hot rods also. And Dad was getting pretty close to wanting to retire. He was kind of tired of the stress owning his own business. And I wanted to get rid of doing collision work. I was kind of sick of insurance companies. So we kind of split the business, and he decided to branch out and do some other things. And then I opened a full-time hot rod and race car building facility. Oh, cool. So that's what I do full-time now.
And what is that called?
Rod and Speed Company.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I've done that now really cool. For a long time. I built bodies and of course maintained the Terry Nish Streamliner during its, endeavors. Yeah. All of the fiberglass work on the outside of Terry's car comes from us, and the body itself came from us originally, me and Dad, and then I've continued on. My dad's gotten to the point where he doesn't want to do a lot of fiberglass work anymore. Yeah. The only thing we're really doing is stuff for ourselves. And times have changed. Vintage hot rodding's kind of changed Bonneville. Yeah. So there's a lot more aluminum bodies going on versus fiberglass composite cars. Yeah. You see a lot of that, and I do some of that also. But yeah, I've been doing a ton of Bonneville over the years. Yeah. As part of my business.
And this is stuff that I wasn't aware of, the contributions that you and your family have made. I mean, I know you guys' name is a big name out there, but just to know that those little details, like I didn't quite understand, like that level of contribution is really amazing. Because your family has not only contributed in that sense of the fiberglass and helping people out that way, but you guys are huge volunteers. And so let's talk a little bit about your volunteering after you get in the club, and then Bo tries to get in the 3 chapter and the Streamliner crashes.
Yeah, that was just devastating. Yeah. What happened back then is I'd made a couple of pretty quick passes, but my mom decided that it was more important to try to put the entire family in the 200 mile an hour club. So that was the end goal. Yeah. Was to try to get every single member of our immediate family into the 200 mile an hour club. Our Streamliner is quite narrow, and it only fits our family. Yeah. And we're all very skinny. You guys
have a certain build.
Yeah. We're very skinny, very lightweight, small build guys. And the rest of our crew members couldn't drive. Yeah. So unlike the 5.9 car, or the Corvette.
Yeah.
Those two cars, they have a cockpit that leads itself more to open driver positioning that's pretty vast. Streamliner is not that way.
Although Shane would fit perfectly with you guys in the Streamliner.
Shane would fit quite well. Yeah. And, so we were, it was really my mom and my dad that decided that we were going to severely attempt to put the entire family in the 200 mile an hour club. By this time, my dad and my mom and a couple of other members had been in the car that do fit, and they had gotten in the car and gotten the 2 club, including Scott Guthrie. Scott Guthrie actually got in the 200 mile an hour club in our Streamliner.
I didn't know that either.
Even though Guthrie him and John Levi, of course, own about every
Guthrie's a motorcycle guy, right?
Yeah,
I did know he got in a car. He said that, but I didn't realize it was yours. Okay.
It was our car. Scott Guthrie got in the 200 mile an hour club in the Burkdoll family Streamliner. So,
with a motorcycle engine?
With a motorcycle engine. We were running a TZ. John, of course, comments on TZ stuff in his podcast as well. And Scott Guthrie is just an iconic, another one of those people at the Bonneville Salt Flats. He had a crew member, John, that tuned with him, and they put that TZ, both the 500 and the 750, both in our Streamliner. And it worked out really well. Got Guthrie in the 200 mile an hour club. And ultimately we went on to other TZ stuff later without Scott, with Don Vesco. And in fact, one of those records still stands today.
It's crazy.
The half liter record is still 200 miles an hour.
Wow.
And, you're talking 500 cc's, naturally aspirated on gasoline. And that's the oldest Streamliner record in the book.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
how old is that record, just for like?
I think that record's set in 87.
Okay, cool.
And with my dad behind the wheel with the Don Vesco engine. Guthrie's records, of course, were broke and by us and other key people in the Bonneville industry. There's some names in there that are pretty big names when you're talking about small displacement, fast cars. So anyway, back to the original question. It was my brother's turn. It was time for me to step away from the Streamliner driving capabilities. The other thing too was I started to realize, because of what I was doing with the USFRA, that you're in the particular danger zone, we'll say. There's some pretty serious risk when you're talking about running 300 miles an hour. And I was raising children, and I had a brand new wife. Yeah. So it was time for me to step away from the driver's seat, and my brother was starting to drive. And then what I did is I shook the car out for Bo, and then Bo got in and started licensing it up and doing all the things that he needed to do and get familiar with the car. So by then the car had a Chevrolet in it by this time. And we had graduated kind of up through that. We ran a Mazda rotary for a while. And then we ended up with the Chevrolet in it. And then both started driving solely on the Chevrolet. And in 2004, the car crashed with my brother behind the wheel. And at the time, he's one of them. At that time, he was one of 7 people to crash above 300 miles an hour and live and talk about it. Yeah. So, it's pretty rare. Yeah. And of course, post-crash inspection comes into that. So, I'm taking a serious look at the car to figure out what point failed. And my brother was smart enough. My brother's had a couple of head traumas in his life. So he's very well educated when it comes to banging himself on the head. And he starts yelling at the EMTs at the time to get their notepad out and start writing this shit down. And he tells the EMTs that the car went hard right and I knocked the chute out. And he kept repeating this and repeating this and repeating this. Now, the EMTs are incredible people. They're volunteers for the Salt Flats. And they've done that for a long period of time. Kurt and Casey are out there on rolling patrol, and they're incredible individuals. They're with me every time we do a post-crash inspection. Kurt and Casey deserve a real round of applause. They put themselves right in the thick of it. You're talking about a car that's, upside down on its side or destroyed.
And these are the EMT guys?
And these are the EMTs, paramedics, and they're involved directly with our timing tower, and they're the first on the scene usually. Yeah. So, Kurt's there, and he's writing these notes down that my brother's rattling off, because my brother knows that he's got a head injury and he's not going to remember. So crazy, he's going to forget. So, during this whole deal, my brother's being transported. He wasn't bad enough to be life flighted, but he did have some issues, and they transported him to the hospital in Salt Lake City, and they drove him in. And of course, there's a whole story to that. but we'll get into that later. So my brother goes in, and when I'm looking at the streamliner, I had actually left and gone back to Ogden. I wasn't at the racetrack at the time when the car crashed.
Okay.
So I wasn't on the scene doing post-crash inspection like I do today. The car came to me wrapped up, and I had to dissect from the car's leftovers of what went wrong first. And I spent about a week looking at the car, and with my brother's notes, had basically worked backwards until I found the faulty part, which turned out to be a right front steering arm that had failed at 300 plus.
So
that led to the car tumbling, parachute out. It's rolling on its, long axis. And fortunately, my brother walked away from a pretty serious crash.
Yeah.
And the car was destroyed. There's nothing left, really. The car was intact, roll structure-wise. It didn't have any major chassis failures when you're talking about the roll structure. We look at that to make the roll book better later. The car fared really well, but you don't recycle one of those. It's kind of like a helmet. If you hit it, that's it. It's done its job. You retire it and you go on to do the next one.
Yeah. So your brother crashes, which, he's very fortunate. We talked about that in his interview, but he crashes and he's very fortunate to basically walk away from that is what he did. And I think it shows what great engineering that you guys had in the car and the safety issues of it.
Yeah. It's, you look back now and you learn a lot in a crash. You learn more than you probably ever could think, because you think to yourself, okay, if it crashes, this is the way it's going to crash.
Yeah.
Then you go back and look at the crash, and fortunately for us, we were fortunate enough to end up with actually film footage.
Yeah.
So we have film footage, not only from one side of the racetrack, from both sides of the racetrack.
Right.
So we have multiple shots of the car actually crashing, so we can see what failed, what it did, what it was doing, and kind of work backwards through that scenario, engineering wise. And say, okay, this worked and this didn't, and how do you improve, and what can you do different to make the driver safer? Because, you typically don't walk away from these kind of things. One of the things that I've done, I started volunteering for the USFRA right after the crash happened. I've been involved heavily with the USFRA in both technical inspection, and also it was a see a need, fill a need kind of a thing for me. Chuck Whiteman was the chief. Well, Dan Wright's, when I first come in, Dan Wright was a technical inspector, chief technical inspector, and then his successor was Chuck Whiteman. I always stayed directly with Chuck Whiteman. Chuck was a altered coupe guy, and he really didn't know anything about high-speed cars, really fast cars. So he asked me to basically consult with him, but not be the chief. So the entire time Chuck Whiteman has inspected, I've always been there with him, looking at parachute technology, looking at roll structures on the fast Lakesters and the high-speed streamline cars. So I took that on to take the stress load away from Chuck Whiteman. He really didn't feel like he had what it took to be the chief when it came to looking at those cars. And the reason
Which really is shows how impressive he is to know that and recognize that and say, and not, because that ego sometimes can get in the way, and to say, hey,
absolutely,
you take that because I don't really get that. So that's pretty impressive of him.
And the thing is, I think the other reason too is Chuck got a rude awakening to chief tech. And his very first meet on the job was when Terry Nish's streamliner crashed, and then my brother.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So he's ready to quit at that point. He's like, I've lost 2 cars under my watch that are high speed, 300 mile an hour cars, and I'm not sure I can do this.
Yeah.
So my dad talked him out of it. At the time, my dad was pretty heavily involved with USFRA, and my dad talked him out of it. And then I come on the scene and just as support, and then that just kind of grew. I left Chuck in as chief tech his entire career until he unfortunately passed away. Yeah. And that just devastated me. So I've always been there with chief tech. During the chief tech with Chuck, I also realized that the USFRA's 130 and 150 club needed some major remapping. So I took over the 130 and the 150 when it comes to inspection. And I I called myself the chief 130 and 150 club tech inspector. And that's how I filled the gap. The other thing I did is I started using the 130 and the 150 club to train new technical officials for USFRA.
Oh, that's smart.
So we did a lot of at my shop, at my hot rod shop. We did a lot of technical inspection courses to train young guys, to get them heavily involved with the sport, because you need technical officials and you need other key members, So I started doing this 10 years ago, training guys. Matter of fact, right now I've been training one that's going to end up ultimately, he's currently starting to replace me. I've started to take a role kind of away from the USFRA. I want to run my own cars some more, and I've done post-crash. I've done post-crash inspection for so long now. It's kind of shook me up. The last couple of years have been really tough on both me and the SCTA combined. The SCTA had a really bad year a couple of years ago. They lost quite a few cars on their watch. Yeah. I lost 2 on my watch, and they were 2 very high-speed cars. We lost at the USFRA event back-to-back. Lee Cecilio's car was the first one to go down at that particular event, and it was ugly. Yeah. And Lee was banged up, but he's just tough as nails.
Oh my gosh.
He's unbelievable. He's
ready to keep on racing. He's ready to get out there again.
Yeah. His car, when I first rolled up to the scene, I was relatively late getting to the scene because at that particular time I was dealing with another incident on our short course that happened to be the Nish family. Okay. Olivia had looped the Roadster and taken a mile marker board in the helmet. Yeah. So I was in the middle of dealing with that when Lee's car crashed. So we were spending some time, and, of course my mom's in the tower, chief timer, and she calls me on my personal cell phone and says, "Hey, we need you on the long course immediately." So I get there and I'm looking at Lee's car. And when I first rolled up on it, I actually didn't recognize what I was looking at. It was so bad that I thought, well, it's laying on its side, and you almost couldn't tell which end of it you were even looking at.
Oh my goodness.
By this time, Kurt and Casey had Lee out of the car. They had extracted him quite well, and we're looking at a pretty large damage field. And all of this has got to be categorized and looked at and photographed. And, it helps make rule book updates, basically, is the reason we do that. Yeah. And so Lee's car had gone down. And then the day after that, we lost the Carbonite car. And the Carbonite car kind of pushed me over the edge. All of these are good friends. Yeah. So I've done about 20 post-crash inspections now.
Over your years
as yes.
tech. So what does the post-crash inspection, what does it look like? What do you look at, and what do you do?
First of all, you catalog the crash site immediately, because not only are you trying to deal with the crash directly and the occupant directly, you have 100 or 200, or in SCTA's case, 500 other racers sitting on the start line waiting their turn. Yeah. So you got to be diligent and speedy about cataloging the information as fast as you can to get the track reopened for the rest of the people that are participating in the event, because you don't want to be down for 4 or 5 or 6 hours. You got guys sitting on the start line that are in fire suits or leathers. If you're a motorcycle rider, and you got to get the scene contained. Right. Now, to give you an idea on how bad it can be, Freivogel's crash with the Carbonite car, the debris field is 2.7 miles. Wow. So you got a lot of stuff you got to look at. Yeah. That car's primary first piece of debris in the field, we'll call it, was a chunk of the body and a section of the tire. And then, much later than that is the roll structure with him contained in it, and then the pieces that happen to carry on past that. So you're looking at a debris field that's 2.5 miles long. 2.7 miles long. It's quite long. Lee Cecilio's car is quite a bit shorter than that. Yeah. Lee absorbed a lot more energy. His injuries show that when you look at him. So, you're looking at debris field right out of the gate. You get that categorized. You get that photographed. It's a little bit easier today because technology's come quite a ways. In fact, we're starting to look at possibly using a drone to photograph the crash scene, because we can fly the drone over much faster and get the crash photographs done quickly. Yeah. And then, of course, you got to have the volunteers come out and help clean the scene. And in the meantime, you got to protect the people that are volunteers. You got to keep in mind these cars are usually leaking fuel. You got ignition sources all over. You got wiring that's hanging out. You got batteries that are still live. You got fire bottles that are activated or have been set off depending on the conditions. And this is all stuff that you have to be real cautious about.
Yeah.
You know, Casey and Kurt, of course, they're the extraction crew. They touch the driver only. They're the only ones doing the driver, and they're the EMTs. And Casey wears a full-fledged fire suit because he's going in. He's going right in there. He's got to get the driver out and get him in a safe place. You know, while the car's potentially leaking fuel.
Yeah.
And Lee's car was a prime example of that. Lee's car was sitting in about 15 gallons of race gas at the time.
Oh my goodness.
It had a huge puddle that was puddled on top of the salt.
Wow.
And you're trying to keep the volunteers out of this containment zone and still clean the mess up at the same time. So this is what happens at the scene.
Yeah.
Once we get the track cleaned so we can continue racing for everybody else that's still sitting on the start line and the driver taken care of with the EMTs, then we basically impound a car and take it over to the timing tower, and that's where we do what we consider post-crash inspection. The one thing that we like to do, USFRA, it's not a USFRA exclusive thing, but it's definitely one thing that I've done, is I take the inspectors out that inspected that particular car, and we take a serious look at what worked and what didn't. So that new up-and-coming inspectors get a feel for what the car looks like and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
It's really good training for those guys.
Yeah.
But it's really hard training for those guys. I mean, these guys are all volunteers. They really don't necessarily know exactly what they're getting into. So they have a hard time. Some of them have had a really hard time with, just dealing with the aftermath, because sometimes you have injuries, and they're all friends. So these are all people we know. We're longtime Bonnevillers, so we know everybody out there pretty much. And these are your friends that you're looking at the crash car and you're making, recommendations to the SCTA. And I'm in direct contact with Lee Kennedy all the time. He's the SCTA official, and Kiwi Steve also. We talk a lot about updates that need to be done to the rule book. And then the other thing that we do during that is I impound all of the safety gear that was on the pilot. So we look at the helmets, we look at the safety belts, we look at a lot of arm restraints, which has led to a lot of arm restraint updates in the rule book over the last few years. And this is what we do. We send the helmets back to the manufacturers so they can look at the helmet shells. The Hans devices, the other thing we do is we take them out of circulation. So we drill holes in them and things like that to make sure they can't get reused.
Just done. Yeah.
We cut seat belts and things like that. Well, most of the time you have to cut seat belts anyway. You can't do a driver extraction without removing the seat belts with some kind of knife. So this is the other side of it. Is looking at the safety gear and getting it back to like the helmet manufacturers and the Hans device manufacturers to make sure that we're staying safe.
And then you make recommendations on safety and rules and whatnot.
We do
that. Is there any like major changes that you have seen over the years of like maybe something you recommended or something that you've seen that's a really important shift in rules? We
knew we had a severe problem with arm restraints a couple of years ago, and we all kind of chimed in. Lee Kennedy and Steve Davies, the chief tech for the SCTA, and myself, we all there was a lot of people involved. It's not 2 or 3 of us. There's more like 10 of us that are involved with that deal. Arm restraints were becoming a huge problem. Yeah. And arm restraints have been a huge problem more than one time in our past. We went through a remap in the 90s where we got rid of aluminum hardware. Now this is, before I was seriously involved. These guys did that, prior to me coming on the scene and trying to help with the post-crash deal. But the more recent one, definitely. And the other thing is too, is the more of that stuff you look at, the more safe that you can become yourself. The easiest way, the best way to put it is the SCTA rulebook is a set of guidelines. It's like the bare necessities. And really you need to take your own safety into account. So if you feel like there's more that could be done, then you should do that. The SCTA rulebook's really just the bottom line.
Okay.
The minimum requirements.
Yeah.
There's more that can be done. And a prime example of that is a lot of us are wearing 7-point seat belts when 5-point is a minimum requirement. But all of our streamliners are equipped with 7-point belts. And a brand new one that's on the scene right now is a 9-point. 9-point safety. Wow. It's not required by the SCTA, but it's something that you might want to consider. So this is the kind of thing that the rule book is there for. The rule book is there to basically set the basis of the guidelines. So
as a racer, you're not trying to push what you can get away with on the rule book, is what you're saying, is that take that and don't try to push those limits. Try to go above those limits.
Exactly. And that's especially when it comes to safety. You can't ever be too safe. I mean, we wear Dash 20 fire suits in all of our cars, regardless if they're front engine, rear engine, regardless if they're nitro or not.
Yeah.
We buy the best we can buy.
Yeah.
I heard it years ago when it came to helmet technology that if you got a $100 head, you use a $100 helmet. Mm. If you got $1,000 head, you got $1,000 helmet.
How much is your head worth?
Exactly. Our safety equipment is pretty cheap when you look at your life expectancy in a high-speed crash at Bonneville.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that's interesting because I haven't really heard a lot about like the post-crash stuff and what you guys do. So that's kind of interesting to hear that point of view. And
that's just one of the things that I do for the USFRA.
Yeah.
Post-crash is the hardest one by all means. For sure. It takes the most brutal toll on your brain for sure. Mentally, it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
The last 2 crashes I went through really put me through a loop. I've been through quite a few prior to that, but that one really.
Those were 2 hard crashes.
I really didn't expect Rob to survive. And looking at what I saw, I mean, and he's changed the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And then it affects you because, for me directly, our family's cars are in the same target velocity. Mm-hmm. So, this isn't a 200 mile an hour car, and I'm not saying 200 mile an hour cars aren't just as dangerous. Most of the time they can be more dangerous, and that's because they have parts hanging out on the outside of them. In your case, roadster stuff, they got 4 wheels outside that can tend to lead to some pretty violent crashes when you start looking at roadster crashes or comp coupe crashes or things like that the game changes. No 2 cars are the same. Motorcycles are the same way. We picked up a lot of motorcycles over the years. We looked at a lot of what works and what doesn't work, weight bias calculations and things like that are a big deal. And this is just one of the key things. The other thing I do for the USFRA is USFRA kind of had a hole when it come to rookie orientation. Mm. So I started doing rookie orientation for all the new drivers to try to make a difference in the way that USFRA's meets function because, not clearing the track is a bit of an issue and it slows up everybody. And that was something that I started doing a couple of years back. It's been 6 or 7 years I've done rookie orientation now. And I take that on for both the 130 club track as well as the high-speed comp cars. And I know what it's like. So, the one thing for me when it comes to rookie orientation is I've been there. I've been 300 plus miles an hour myself. Of course, I'm a 200 mile an hour club member. I was hoping to get in the blue hat territory and could never manage to make that. Maybe that's in my future.
Yeah.
But rookie orientation was a big deal for me also. So, for the years, I've trained tech inspectors and done rookie orientation and then been the chief.
Yeah, so you're very volunteer heavy, especially in the USFRA, and you just kind of wanted to stress the importance of volunteers and the role that they play. And this is the backside of land speed racing that you don't see and maybe even haven't even heard about on this podcast yet about what an important role that they play. Even
though our racetrack surface is obviously, that's a big deal for all of us.
Yeah.
The track itself is in really poor shape and it needs some help from the people and the politicians and everybody else, the racers and everybody involved. The Wendover itself and the state of Utah, everybody needs to get involved with that deal. On the flip side of that, the one thing that I see that's a degradation to all of our sport is the fact that we're losing volunteers. We don't have any volunteers up and coming. It's really hard to find enough staff to actually function a full-fledged event. The USFRA has been struggling with staff for about 5 years. We need volunteers. We're getting to the point now where we're having a hard time actually pulling off an event efficiently, effectively, and safely because of the lack of staff on board. Anybody that has a crew member that can get involved, please do.
Yeah.
We need all the help we can.
And you can go to saltflats.com.
Yes.
In order to get to that website to get hooked into into volunteering or to contact somebody about it. So.
And the chief tech side or just technical and that takes a while to get used to that. You can't just instantly dive into tech. You need to really know what you're doing there. But there are so many other roles and so many other things that go on around you that you don't realize that we need people.
Yeah.
A lot of our sport is elderly people that have spent their lives donating time. My mom and dad are one of those people. Your mom and dad, those people, and they're due to retirement, and there's not a lot of people to replace them. So, we need we need officials out on the racetrack. We need people to set up cones. We need people to put up boards. I mean, we need help in registration. This is the kind of things that we definitely need. If we can't find those people, it's going to lead to a meet that's not as fun for any of us.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we've got enough key people in roles and people that are experienced enough to teach the new up and comers.
I like that. And just to keep this going, we need everybody to participate and young people to start stepping up and getting involved, because that's just the way that it's going to grow and continue.
And I see less and less of that every year. I've started to take, like I said, a step back, which I actually kind of feel guilty because I feel like there's not a lot of people to replace me, so to speak. I've trained a couple of key people that are really doing a hell of a job. Justin McAllister now will probably be the new chief tech inspection for USFRA. He's going to replace me and Chuck Whiteman ultimately. And he started in the 100-mile-an-hour challenge, actually, the VW deal.
Oh, yeah.
On our 130 club track in our street car category. That's where he got his I went to him one day and I just said, hey, I need a technical official to deal with the 100-mile-an-hour challenge Volkswagens. And of course, he has a business that is VW oriented. And that was all tied together. Plus, him and his brother were running a car at the time. And I took him and his brother both. And they started teching with us. And Tom Berkland helps us with tech, and Rex Sabota helps us with tech. And they're two of the most experienced people we have, because they've seen both sides of the spectrum, both from high-speed cars and motorcycles.
Yeah. So
I send all my new guys immediately with Tom and Rex and try to get them, overloaded with information as fast as they possibly can, because, Tom and Rex are just key people. They're volunteers, but we only have them for a short period of time when we're teching. Yeah. Tech happens for us in the early days. Now me and Chuck Whiteman have always had the standing that we'll tech cars as long as there are cars to be teched. So when we show up first 3 days of the event, we do setup, we start teching cars, and we tech until the middle of the night. And we tech with flashlights.
Oh yeah.
For us. I mean, we've always had the open book policy that we'll tech as long as there's guys to be teched. And because of that, we turned tech into a 2-day event instead of a single day event. And we get through as many as we can. As long as there's guys that are willing to stand in the dark, we're willing to accommodate you. Yeah. And that's what we've done. And I've trained all the guys that have been involved with me to do the same thing. We tech in the middle of the night. And there are countless days. It's one of the things I miss the most, not having Chuck, is we'd wind down at the end of the day after the last car, whichever car that may be. And it's 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And we're still out on the track.
Yeah, wow.
And we're, we used to crack open a beer and enjoy the stars and the moon. And
I bet you get to see a lot.
And just be out there all by ourselves. And it's one of those things that I definitely miss now that Chuck's not here.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is a solution for people to get more involved, or to get more people to volunteering? What do you think?
I think one of the big things is pressure from the car owners. Everybody has a car that's coming to Salt, that the crew members a lot of them are volunteers. I hear stories all over the start line. I spend a lot of time on the start line. After tech winds down, I get a little more free time. If I'm, not running my own car, of course. But I hear stories on the start line about guys on the internet that just put a search out on, social media, basically saying, hey, I'd really like to get involved with Bonneville. Is there a car in my local area? I remember hearing a story from some guys in Minnesota. There happened to be a land speed car that was going to Bonneville, and the guy was relatively close, couple-hour drive, and got involved with this team and just came as a volunteer. Every cart's out there has a crew. Yeah. And it takes more than one person. You really can't run an event. Well, you can. There's guys that are doing it, obviously, because you never want to say never.
Yeah, right.
But everybody's got extra crew members. And the big thing is to get the crew members involved. Say, hey, the STTA or the USFRA, both of us need help. And then, and just get the crew to get involved with things as simple as course stewarding, which is a big one. We have a hard time finding enough.
Even if it's just stewards. You don't need to be a course steward for the whole meet. You can be a course steward for one day.
One day. They'll rotate
we just need
through
you for a day. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually they'll buy all those guys lunch. So lunch is kind of on the group and just volunteer. And the bug meet, Rex and Tom involved with Delvine, that's one of the things they had to do. They had to go to the crew and say, hey, we need some crew people to to help staff this event, or none of us are going to be able to run.
Right.
And we're not to that point yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And that's a great point, is that as you encourage your crew to run, because eventually if they don't, or to participate, to volunteer, if they don't, you're not going to be able to run.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you need these volunteers, and always be thankful and kind to the volunteers that are there.
USFRA, we call them blue shirters. We all wear a light blue or dark blue shirt, official shirt. Almost every one of those people are volunteering time. None of them are on the payroll. There's no payroll.
No.
They're all out there doing the best they can with the environment they have to work in, and it's stressful on some days. I watched the presidents over the years, one of which was my dad. Now, currently it's Dennis Sullivan. And, they get gray hair in a hurry and they get stressed out. And it's our job as officials to take some of that stress away from them.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why I try to do as much as I can and then inspire the youth. This is the one thing, this is a big thing for car owners. I have always taken myself time for the youth. When young guys, that we have a school program that comes out with the USFRA, we have buses full of kids that I always take time. I put them in the cars. I put them in the seatbelts. I let them wear helmets. I let them get in there, get under the hood. Take the time to spend with these young people, because they're our future. They're the future of our sport lies in their hands. So anybody that is walking through your pit area that you feel like, oh, he's here for a reason. He wants to take a picture. A lot of them will ask to even take pictures. Put them in the car. It gets them excited. I've done that hundreds of times. I do that at car shows, even when we're not at the track. I do it everywhere I can, is to try to help promote the Bonneville Salt Flats as best as I can with the youth.
That's right.
It's a big deal.
That's right. I agree with you 100%. Well, speaking of the future and what we're doing, what is some future projects that you're thinking about? Well, what are the current projects that you do now?
Currently, I'm running with Chad Zupan.
Yeah.
He's Chad's a longtime roadster guy. Him and his dad volunteers also with the USFRA. Jim Zupan used to build all of our drags to drag the racetrack with. They had a pretty large welding facility at the time, and they ran a street roadster, which ultimately ended up being Dennis Sullivan's car. So Dennis, the club president, USFRA's club president, is running an ex-Zupan car, and they grew into a modified roadster. And then I got involved when the car was in its early stages. And started doing a little bit of aerodynamic consultant, which actually didn't work out too well for me on that particular car. Chad's car's kind of been the thorn in my side. Everybody's got one. Chad's car happens to be that car. Yeah. Unfortunately, later on, Jim Zupan passed from Lou Gehrig's disease. And it left Chad kind of only crew member. I mean, he didn't have a big crew. It was him and his uncle, Frank, and his dad, and the three of them ran the car. So as soon as Jim was gone, there's a big hole in Chad, and I could see that. And I just loved Chad Zupan and his mom. The family was great. Yep. They made me feel right at home. So I just dove in. Next thing I know, we're trying to get Chad to run 200. And Chad's a nitro guy. And he starts pouring nitro on his car, and it's just unbelievable. Yep. To watch Chad grow in the nitromethane deal has just been incredible. Yeah, we were talking about that with BJ, that he was going around asking people about nitro. Well, now he's the guy that you go and ask about running nitro. He really is. I mean, he ought to change his middle name to Nitro. That'd be great. Chad Nitro Zupan. Yeah, he definitely is. He's done it really well. We were running, it's a purple car, 1727 car. It's a 27 Ford Roadster, modified Roadster, and it runs a 2-liter Pinto, and it ultimately ended up putting Chad in the 200 mile an hour club. Naturally aspirated with a huge load of nitro. Now, Chad's warm-up tune is 60%. He won't even warm up anything less than 60%. Typically, we're running in the 80, 90, 95 range. Yeah. And, so we did that for a couple of years, and it took us a while to get there. And I was working the aerodynamic side of it and the head cage side of it to try to lower the drag on a car and tire packages and things like that, not all of which worked out. I picked a tire package to cut the drag on the car, and it turned out to be a disaster for Chad, and Chad ended up with the car turned around backwards. Ooh. They had a pretty high speed, and it cost us a run and actually damaged the car slightly. And I felt bad because it put Chad at risk. And we ended up going back to a tire package that we knew that was proven, and then ultimately ended up in the nitromethane and did a hell of a job with his own engine. He's his own engine builder. He doesn't have an engine builder in his corner. He does it all himself. And he starts pouring nitro on it, and ultimately ended up getting in the 200 mile an hour club at 200.7. So he's one of the slower speed 200 mile an hour club guys, but it was enough to get it done.
Yeah.
And he did that actually at the 4 mile, because like a lot of nitro cars, there's a lot of heavy hitting nitro cars out of there that tend to run out of fuel before they get to the end.
Oh yeah.
So this car is very similar. It consumes about 4 or 5 gallons of nitromethane in 4 miles. So we were running it out to 4. A little concerned about the fuel volume and if the car would actually live. I mean, you got
right.
At the time, his record pass is 92%. So you know, and that was really cool to be involved with that whole deal. And it kind of crystallized a long-term friendship between me and him when his dad passed, unfortunately. And then I just got heavily involved, and we are the best of friends now. We do everything together. We do vintage hot rodding together, and we do salt flats racing together, and the two of us are always in each other's corner. And ultimately, he's, you know, what we decided to do now is once he was in the 2 club, and I'd taken a hiatus away from my own vehicle, which is a pickup truck. He come to me with this harebrained idea. He said, I'd like to go motorcycling. And, you know, here I am thinking, okay, when I was 6 years old, I built my first motorcycle. It was a BMX bike, is a Bonneville Salt Flats. And I'm thinking, hey, motorcycling sounds fun. So he developed his own engine, a 250cc pushrod Harley Davidson. Well, it's actually a Harley Sprint or Aermacchi, if anybody knows the Italian side of that deal. And it's, of course, 80-90% nitro, you know, injected. No boost. Chad's not a boost. Currently, we're not running any kind of manifold pressure. And it's nitro Harley Davidson. And he started being real successful. And of course, I'm the crew chief. And I wanted to be super successful at the crew chief. So this was a new endeavor for us. We took a lot of pointers from John Levi. John's a good friend. Yeah. Scott Guthrie, good friend. You know, we know a lot of people. You know, I spent some time talking to Sam Wheeler before we even got into this deal. And, you know, unfortunately, Sam's not with us anymore either. And, you know, we decided to go run this motorcycle, and we've had some really good success with it. I mean, Chad builds a hell of an engine package. Wow. And, you know, nitro Zupan, we just pour it in there and cut it loose. And we started working on the bike. We did start with a bike that needed a lot of help aerodynamically, and I haven't had as much time with the bike as I hope to get with it. But we started to see some pretty good success. And, you know, any record at Bonneville is not easy. If there's an existing track record, it's usually not a pushover, you know. And I agree with John Levi saying that, you know, any record in the book takes up as much space. Yeah,
I like that.
He's absolutely right. I've been 300 myself. I set a couple of 200 mile an hour records. I have more fun setting the slower speed stuff. It's a little less work for me. Yeah. But, you know, record's a record. Record's a record. Chad started on a pretty respectable 70 mile an hour record when you're talking about. What was the class? It's a modified. We run both in A and M is what they call it. It's modified chassis, pushrod engine. Okay. The engine and the chassis are from the same manufacturer. They're both Harley Davidson. And we run it on fuel. Cool. So we're running modified production or modified pushrod, 250 and also 350. And Chad ended up putting about 30 miles an hour on the track record, which is unheard of. That's impressive. You know, so he's been super successful. And then he decides, hey, well, we were joking around with each other, and he said, why don't you get on? And I thought, oh, this ought to be fun. You know, I've got some experience. I was a pretty successful BMX racer, so I feel pretty comfortable on small displacement motorcycle. It kind of comes secondhand. If you're good on 2 wheels, you're good on 2 wheels. Yeah. John Levi kind of mentioned that, you know, you stay involved with motorcycle riding so you can be good at it full time, you know, outside of just Bonneville. So I was doing the same thing. I do a lot of pedaling bicycles and jumping rocks and single speed kind of stuff. So I got a pretty good balance characteristic, and I thought it'd be really cool to be able to not only be in the 200 mile an hour club in a car, but actually go set a land speed record on a motorcycle. Yeah. So cool. last year, I did exactly that. So I climbed on and set a record myself. Yeah, cool. And it's been a lot of fun. And we got a lot going on there. Yeah. We got future plans for the Harley Davidson as well as other plans for other cars. I've got a Lakester I built a couple of years ago. I'd like to get finished. Yeah. I took a hiatus from that. Like what kind of Lakester? Like small displacement Lakester. Cool. K class, J class. You know, of course, nitromethane with Chad involved. I actually built that car about, it's been about 12 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
I built it on short notice. The record was relatively soft, and I thought I want to build a belly tank. I'm a Bonneville Salt Flats racer. Belly tank sounds like a good idea. So I built this car in 45 days.
Oh, wow.
And we were going to go to October's event and run this car with a 277 cc engine. It's like taking a knife to a gunfight because you're at 500 cc class. But I thought we could get it done, and the event rained out.
Oh.
So here's this car I built in 45 days that needs some fine tuning. I mean, anything you do in 45 days is going to need a lot when you get home. And I set it off to the side. And at the time, of course, this is post streamliner for us. We got a new car in development, but it takes years to build a new streamliner. And we're sitting around my hot rod shop, and we decided, hey, we're going to do a truck. And I had a pickup truck out back and a motorcycle engine left over from some other endeavors at Bonneville. And I come up with this harebrained idea to put a bike motor inside of a pickup truck and go attempt to set a land speed record. And the real driving force behind it was one of our other crew members that spent a lifetime with us, that when our streamliner crashed, he has nothing to show for it either. I built the truck really to have that open seat kind of cockpit that anybody could drive. And we had a crew member that grew up outside of Detroit in upstate Michigan that had always listened to what was going on at Bonneville. You know, when he was a child, they used to steal the radio and turn it on because they broadcast in Michigan what was going on in the Salt Flats in the early days. Now we're talking the really early days. You know, Jay Hawley's his name, and then his wife, Mary. Both of those people, Jay was very heavily involved with the history of Bonneville and what was going on out there when he was a young man, but it could never put anything together. So I got this harebrained idea to put a motorcycle engine in this truck and give it to Jay as a gift and let Jay drive. And at the time, Jay had started suffering from MS. So we had a limited time before his condition deteriorated and he couldn't drive. So I built this truck solely as a gift for him to just go race.
Wow.
And had really good success with it. Another good friend of ours that owned the record at the time, Jesse Winders, a local.
Yeah, Jesse.
Jesse is fantastic, neat family.
Yeah.
They own the record, and I thought, well, how fast could a stock-bodied truck even go with 60 cubic inches? Jesse owned the record at the time at 88 miles an hour. And I geared this truck for about 110. I thought there's no way it's ever going to get there, Jesse's got a pretty good record. Mike Mangeli, another key SCTA official, was doing quite a bit in small displacement stuff at El Mirage. And they kind of set the bar for us to shoot for. And we put this GSXR 1000cc bullet bike engine in this 94 and later S10 pickup truck and dropped it off the trailer. Record's 88. So, first driver's license pass could potentially qualify for a land speed record. And we unloaded off the trailer, and sure as shit, that's exactly what happened. Jay put it in gear, first time pilot.
It's so fun.
We always teased him because the fastest thing he'd ever driven prior to that was an aluminum fishing boat. He's got no experience really in any kind of high-speed vehicle, and we started him slow at 88. And by the end of that meet, he had pushed the record to 109.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Got to give him a ride. And then it sounded like you gave Mary a ride after that.
We did. We put Mary in there also. We have future plans. We had future plans to put my daughter in, try to get my daughter in before she was actually 16 years old. We had some written permission from the USFRA, and we discussed it with the SCTA also, that basically your driver's license is considered an E-license at the SCTA, according to the SCTA rules. Well, we discussed this thing of possibly making an extra driver's license pass if you didn't have an actual driver's license, to put my 15-year-old daughter in at the time and potentially run a record. Well, we ended up hurting the motor in the truck. Mary was driving at the time, blew up the motor, and the truck was kind of out of commission at the time. And by the time the truck was repaired, my daughter was already 16, so we ended up not doing that. So, the pickup, we had a lot of success with the truck. It led to a lot of other trucks that are being built today. You see a lot of S10s at Bonneville now. It's an up and coming class. The mini truck class is really taken off. It's a huge future for our sport. The mini truck guys are And, I do a lot of consulting with those guys and try to help out everybody I can. I see a lot of S10s, but mine was one of the first ones and it had really good success. And, it's naturally aspirated record on gas. We put 50 miles an hour on the record. So it's a huge jump.
And they seem to do pretty good when the salt conditions are bad.
Yes, they do. We've hit the point now too that we're having some stability issues myself. I actually spun it out. So, we're looking at weight and balance calculations and aerodynamic drag within the rules and things like that. So, it's a new territory for me. Matter of fact, the S10 is tougher to drive than the 300 mile an hour car.
Wow.
It's short wheelbase.
Yeah.
And it's when it was running 130, no problem.
Yeah.
Now it's running about 150 and it's starting to become an issue.
Yeah.
So the track degradation that we've seen in the last few years has really had a huge effect on that truck. Now that truck started with a semi-rigid front suspension, semi-rigid. It's got a progressive bushing in it, but it's still got a shock.
Yeah.
And then a full-fledged, rear suspension. And the track conditions are so rough now that it's really not working.
Oh yeah.
So we're back to the drawing board on that deal too.
So are there any other future projects that you have? Is that kind of your future project?
Yeah.
Is this S10?
Well, the S10's kind of on the back burner right now while we're running this push rod Harley deal. We're really looking forward to the motorcycle endeavors. And then also we started discussing bringing Chad's Purple Roadster back out and doing some there.
Cool.
And then we've also discussed running a 2-liter Pinto in a belly tank. So there's a little bit of, I've always planned in cars.
Yeah, right.
I'm always planning new cars. And then we've got some new people that are involved with us that we're talking about running some open wheel stuff. Now, in the meantime, I'm still crewing for my dad and my brother.
Yeah.
And, all of their endeavors.
And your dad's looking to go 400. So that's a big deal.
My dad's got a lot. We've got a lot to do there.
Yeah.
There's that car's overall aerodynamic shape is all of my design. The body configuration all come out of my head. I drafted that on a drafting table the old school way with a compass and a pocket calculator and no computer there. Yeah. And we're looking forward to, and the math supports, we're looking forward to trying to get that car to crack 400. So I'm definitely involved with that. And there's just not enough of me to go around.
That's right.
I'd like to have another streamlined car that was motorcycle powered, small displacement car.
Yeah.
500 cc's, 750 cc's, 1000 cc range. But even 1000 cc streamliner is still a 300 mile an hour car.
Right.
So, keeping that in mind, the concern I have is the fact that I'm not sure there's going to be a racetrack to put it on. Mm-hmm. And you don't take a streamliner to any other place on the planet. I mean, when you say you're a streamliner owner, that goes hand in hand with Bonneville. There's only one place those cars run.
Yeah.
You can say, I own a Roadster, and somebody will say, well, what kind of a Roadster?
Yeah.
When you say I own a streamliner, that's the only place it goes. You don't take a streamliner usually to something like Loring, Maine. Yeah. Or, the Colorado Mile or some 1 mile asphalt event. As much as that's a huge part of our up and coming sport, right? That's not a place really for a streamlined car. So looking at the future of our salt flats, that it looks pretty grim from where I'm sitting. We want to see, the politicians make some huge changes there. The mining industry makes some changes in, as well as us. Yeah. And hopefully the future of the Bonneville Salt Flats survives and I can build that small displacement 300 mile an hour streamlined car.
And that's changing people's what they're going to build and how they're reacting to things and how they're going to change their cars and whatnot. But ultimately, there is an option to save the salt, and it's that salt restoration project. And I think it is going to make a huge difference. We just have to get our federal government right now is the one that's kind of holding everything back in terms of not giving us the support, putting it in the budget. And so we really need people to, as much as we need people to go to the salt and SaveTheSalt.org and to get, donate and buy their t-shirts to help that, to get that, it's 206 million tons of salt that we want to get from the south side of I-80 to the north side of I-80 where the salt flats is. And so the federal government's the one that's really holding this up. So we would like everybody to kindly call Chris Stewart's office. He is that is his territory. The Salt Flats is his district, I guess. And also you can call your local, like your federal congressman, and encourage him to or her to support the salt restoration project so that we can still have streamliners out there and still have other cars out there in order to race.
Yeah, streamliners are a huge part of Bonneville.
That's right.
They're really what makes Bonneville what Bonneville is.
That's right.
Ab Jenkins's days, some of the first cars that came out were liner cars. Ab was running, of course, the Mormon Meteor, and incredible. Bonneville wouldn't exist without Ab Jenkins, really.
And they couldn't do that now with the conditions that it is.
And he was a politician. Yeah. He was a mayor for Salt Lake City. And, he did a huge amount for Bonneville Salt Flats. And we're asking the mayor, again, to do some more. The politicians need to get heavily involved about, conserving the Bonneville Salt Flats, as well as the racers, and don't be afraid to donate. And that's the other thing too. I mean, you put some pressure on your congressmen for sure, but don't forget also that the SCTA and the USFRA both have a Save the Salt link. Anybody can buy a T-shirt. Anybody that's not even involved with land speed racing can donate anytime they want. Mm-hmm. You can come out and take a look at it. Bonneville has become kind of an iconic stop now, especially in the recent years with COVID. Yeah. We've seen a huge influx of new people that are coming out there to just shoot photographs. Yeah. Don't forget that that's a place that may not be here in a few years.
That's right.
And those people that are using those for wedding pictures and things like that, please, please, please donate.
Yeah. Donate.
I mean, if you can get on the, Save the Salt Coalition or any of those places and really put forth some effort. I mean, everybody's using this iconic place. They're using it for camping now. You see a lot of people out there that are involved. And the other thing I'd really like to stress too, to those people that aren't land speed racers, as well as the land speed racers that are using the Salt Flats, keep in mind that, us Bonneville Salt Flats racers, everything that we take out, we bring back with us. We don't leave any debris on our racetrack. Right. It's a real hassle for us to clean up. We're seeing a lot of influx of campfires and debris left over in soda cans and glass bottles and things like this that are just they're just detrimental to a land speed car. Anybody that's using the Salt Flats that's listening to the podcast that's not even related to any kind of an automobile, please take the time to take the stuff back with you, clean up your campfire sites. And we're not asking you to not be there because we like to see the salt being used. We just ask you to, be a little diligent about the things that you take out and what you bring back, and watch your debris and your garbage and things like that, and make sure that you're doing your part to help save our environment. Mm-hmm. It's just as important in a national forest or, the ocean or anywhere else. Yep. But the Salt Flats has a huge problem right now, and debris is one of those. And it takes more people to help clean that up. So more volunteers, like we talked about earlier. And anybody that's involved with what's going on out there and the beautiful scenery that it makes in the evening and the daytime and the sunsets and the sunrises, this is things that's important to all of us.
That's right.
And please do your part.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You've been a great guest. And again, just go to savethesalt.org to donate or buy a T-shirt. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like it, share it, and consider giving it a review and rating. Please go follow me on Instagram and Facebook pages under Land Speed Legends. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to Land Speed Legends. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, keep up with the show on Facebook and Instagram under Land Speed Legends. Until next time.